Good afternoon. I'm here today with two of Bermuda's best and brightest young minds, Ms. Jason A. Smith and Mr. Ryan Parent-Chief, both of the Barclay Institute. It's my pleasure to be here with these two young people today as we discuss some of the issues facing our island today. Those are going to include the educational system, some of the political schemes that are going on at the moment, the economy, and some racial issues, if these two young people feel that there are any, and how we can go about addressing them. It's often the case that us as young people are distanced from the topics that are discussed in the older generation, and we can be almost fallen by the wayside because of our age. But I'm a firm believer that the young people need to speak up. I myself, as a young person, choose to speak up because we are the youth of today, but the leaders of tomorrow. So I've introduced them, but I'll let them tell you a little bit about themselves. Mr. Parent-Chief.
Good evening. As you know, my name is Ryan Robertson, Parent-Chief. I attend the Barclay Institute. I'm 17 years old, and I'm in my last year there. And I'm just happy to be here, and I'm just passionate about issues affecting the community. So I'm glad that Mr. Hill invited me.
Ms. Smith.
Good evening. My name is Jason A. Smith. I do attend the Barclay Institute. I'm 17, and I also am in my last year of high school there. I'm honored that Eron has asked me to come and speak today and to give a youth opinion as well as a female perspective, if you will.
Well, I guess first on the agenda today we can start talking about education. Recently in the headlines there were some headlines regarding the educational system and some of the things that were taking place in it. I'd just like to get your opinion on how you feel, and you're a student in the public education system. How do you feel things are going, and if there are any changes you see and how we can go about addressing them?
Personally, I feel that education is being neglected and has been neglected for a long time. In my opinion, the day-to-day operations of an education ministry shouldn't just be signing transcripts or dealing with teachers or student issues. I think that on a day-to-day basis, we need to be reforming the education system, and it needs to be constantly changing to meet the needs of society as well as the future. And right now in particular, I don't see that, especially as a public school student. I feel that there's much more that could be done. I think that there needs to be a drastic reform in education, and I certainly think that it's not being given the due attention that it needs right now.
When you say that you feel that it's being neglected or drastic change, what are some of the changes that you feel could happen or you feel should be seen in the educational system?
As far as large, drastic changes, I think that it needs to be reformed from bottom to top. That involves considering the removal of middle schools. It involves possibly the creation of new high schools or smaller high schools, definitely the implementation of a trade school, and on a smaller scale, as far as the actual system that we're using, particularly in high school, where we're on a semi-Cambridge system, for example, where we're doing GCSEs, we're doing some A supplementary levels, but it's still not enough for students to get into those top universities that we should be getting our children into. So for example, one may say that Bermuda's education system, particularly at Barclay, for example, is on a British system. When really, even going to England, going to a British school, Jason and myself have both applied. But we can't get into schools like Cambridge and things like that. We can't even get to lower level schools as far as prestige. We have to apply for what is known as a foundation year, which basically states that we don't have the qualifications that we need. So even though we're doing GCSEs in high school, when British students are doing them in middle school, and we're not doing the A levels that will get us into Cambridge and things like that. So right now we're sort of stuck. And that's how I see students, particularly coming from public school, they're stuck because each choice that they want to make, whether it's the US, Canada, or England, they certainly could get better qualifications.
Sure. And how do you feel, Jason, about some of the things going on in the educational system, some of which Ryan has talked about today?
I agree large in part with what Ryan had to say. I definitely do think that there are lots of changes that we need to see within the education system. And while I believe it does start from almost a rebuilding perspective, I think that that might be a more unrealistic goal, but possibly implementing changes from the levels of education. So if we are seeing a large problem within middle school students coming into the high school sector, students can only have two choices, either Cedar Bridge or Berkeley, or they go to private school. Maybe that focal point should be where we should focus on the rebuilding or restructuring of that system. I do feel like the elementary system within the public education system, I think so far I believe it is doing a good job, or it's maintaining the status quo of how children should be educated. But I think middle school is where we see children fall off, children, sort of just get distracted, and then moving on into Cedar Bridge and Berkeley, which is their only choices, we see them coming into those schools with problems. And so we can't expect them to thrive in Berkeley or Cedar Bridge or any other school if in middle school they've already been affected, pushed to the side, not given the right opportunities, not being able to basically become who they should be. And so I think that my focal point in the education system of change would have to start at middle and move upwards. And so with that said, I think it would lead to much less problems with students in the high school arena, such as myself and Ryan, who are now applying or have applied already to university and are encountering problems. I know plenty of people that actually attend schools such as BHS and Soltis who are on a specific system. There is no mix in between.
Right.
BHS does IB, Soltis does AP, along with some GCSEs, and they have the ability to get into these colleges that Ryan and I are trying to get into, and plenty of other people within the public schools, as well as maybe other private schools such as maybe BR, MSA, and they don't have, basically we don't have the same advantages. So it's very, very hard for us to get into these schools.
You bring up a very good point that there's two high schools, Cedar Bridge and Berkeley, and then public high schools, I should say, and then you have the private schools, you have the Soltis, the BHS. And one point that I did note that you brought up is that these private schools, they sort of have a plan that puts you on a platform to move to the next step, as opposed to what I'm hearing from both of you guys, if I'm hearing correctly, that you guys are going to have to do an extra year, a foundation year, in order to prepare you for university. So I guess my question is, do you believe that the majority of our island students are, if I'm correct, going to the public high school system? Do you believe that there's a difference in the level of education that you receive at your public high school institution than those who are in the private sector?
Well, my aim is not just to bash the public school education system.
Understand.
Obviously students are doing the best that they can, most of them, the majority of them. However, I certainly think that students who are going to private schools such as Work Academy, BHS, are competing at a higher level than students such as at Berkeley and Cedar Bridge. And we see that with the introduction of things like the IB program. When you look at, for example, Berkeley's history, where we used to be neck and neck with Work Academy, but now you see Work Academy students coming out with 40-something IB points, and you have Berkeley students over here with a few GCSEs, which Work Academy will have gotten years before that. So I just think, as far as competition, there is none. It's not about Berkeley students trying to keep up. There is no competition. We're not even in the same league as schools who are on such a high level of IB or things like that. And another thing to note is that, as Jay Shanae stated, our primary education system seems to be running well. But if you want to talk about implementing IB at a school like Berkeley, you have to consider from bottom to top, prepping those students from kindergarten all the way up. Because I know at Work Academy, where they have programs like that, students will go in at kindergarten and automatically they're being prepped for that final year where they're getting that intensive high-level education. Whereas at Berkeley, you just have that 4 years to get as much as you can and run with it and see what you can get into. So as far as competition, there is none.
Right. And I know there's going to be, how many students would you guys say you have at your school in total?
730, approximately 730.
So 730 students in one place. Do you think that causes some problems socially?
Socially, I do not think that it causes problems, because I feel like just because there are that amount of students does not, in my opinion, affect the way that they learn, because there are plenty of countries as well as schools worldwide that have plenty more students, thousands of students, yet these students come out top of their class, get into top colleges. So I don't think that the number of students in Berkeley is the reason for concern or possibly for worry, because the school was built to actually accommodate much more. But I think that the main problem is just, as we've already sort of highlighted, the fact that these students have 4 years, and let's be realistic, mostly they have 2, because the last 2 years of high school is when most people become, and say, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then they start gearing towards that. They have 2 years to prepare, and that just leads to some problems. As someone who has gone to BHS, Soltis, and MSA, I see the differences on how these schools operate per se, and there's a big difference. As Ryan already said, there is no competition, and there's a huge difference in the way that we learn. We will come home from school and possibly have an hour, maybe 30 minutes worth of homework, if we have any homework at all, whereas our friends at these other schools are coming home with, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 hours of homework. And no, I'm not trying to say that homework is like the key, and if they get more homework, that means they're smarter. But it just, the stuff that they learn and the courses, everything is just different. Everything's just different. And so it is, eye-opening when we have friends like that and we see them and,
right.
They're doing way more than we are.
Right.
And to piggyback off of Jay Shanae, I would agree that academically, size doesn't play a major factor, because obviously, when you go into class, you don't have those 700 students in one class. The class size is still, relatively small. Right. So academically, there's not a large impact. But socially, even socially, for the most part, everyone gets along. 90% of the students at Berkeley, for example, do very well and are productive students. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to social issues, I personally think that because the school is so big, it allows for some students to slip through the cracks. Now, I don't think that size is a big issue, but I certainly think that the amount of resources being allocated to the school, as far as counseling, as far as having task forces looking out for those students that are slipping through the cracks, I think that size has a factor in that, because when you have a smaller school with a family environment and everybody knows, okay, that child is going through something right now, it creates a sense of looking out for each other. But at Berkeley, we still have a similar sense because most people know each other. But as far as students falling through the cracks, it's a lot more likely,
right.
Due to the size of the students,
right.
of the population of the school.
Another interesting thing that I want to bring to both of you guys, is something, government scholarships. And the grants that are given to people such as yourself, young people such as yourself. As you would have both been aware, they've been slashed significantly. How do you guys feel about it as young people in the public education system?
Would you like to go first?
Sure. Truthfully, I feel like if the government wants to stress, we want our young people to succeed, and we try to set them up for greatness, and we do this and we do that, you cannot say that in one breath and then in the next breath say, oh, but along with that, we're also going to cut down government scholarships because we just don't have the money. I feel like as a government, your main focus should be educating and gearing the young people for basically taking your position in the next 20 to 30 years. And so I think it's almost hypocritical for them to say, we're trying to do this and that to gear you for great things, and we're affording you this and affording you that, but in the same breath, we're taking away one of the main almost pillars that most students need to go away to university and to stay in university. And so I just find it very hypocritical, and I feel like the government would rather waste money on things that are not essential for the public eye, and they're neglecting things that are essential, such as educating the youth.
I completely agree. I can't really say I'm surprised because the fact that we don't have a dedicated education minister or a dedicated permanent secretary shows to me the current administration's commitment to education, public education in Bermuda. The fact that we don't have people managing our education system solely and on a dedicated basis shows to me where their priorities are. And especially when you see the scholarships being cut, shows to me where the priorities are. And it's certainly not in the education of our public school students. Because if we want to use the excuse that, oh, we need to cut our budget, you can't put a price on education. You don't decrease the level of educational output on a student just because you don't have enough money, as you say. Certainly a priority should be education. If you need to cut parks department, if you need to let a few trees grow out a little bit more in order to make sure that that public school child gets a good education and goes to a good university, then that's what you need to do. I certainly don't accept the reasoning that, okay, we're short of money, so we need to cut education, because as far as prepping our students for the future, as far as getting us out of this economic recession, the only way you're going to do that is with those intellectual individuals,
Right.
is with those up-and-coming citizens who are going to influence policy and who are going to implement the changes that will prevent situations like this from happening again. So it's certainly ridiculous, in my opinion, to cut scholarships at this time.
And I hear you on that one. Another limb of it, I hear you talking about preparing the young people to take the place of the leaders of today, and building the future, and education and the grants and the scholarships are one of those. But what about the opportunities, like you guys as summer students? It's going to be coming up, summer students in a minute. And what about the opportunities now that you guys would have? Do you guys feel that you have opportunities that would lend to your experience in the career of your choice during the summertime, or how do you guys feel about that?
Well, personally, I work at the aquarium on the summers doing aqua camp, and that's just because I volunteered there since I was 13 and I could be a junior volunteer. But for me, someone who wants to go in, who knows that they're going to go into the career of being a lawyer and then go into the career of politics, I feel like it's on a who you know basis. And so I think that leads to problems. Like, because I have a father who is, I guess, well connected, and so he knows people, I do get the offers of, okay, you can do a summer intern at this law firm or that law firm, but that's simply just because he knows someone and he can lend out like a word or whatnot. But people who do not have that opportunity, I feel like it's not broadcasted enough, and I feel like law firms, accounting firms, business firms, any type of firms that are in the next few years looking to hire these young people, I feel like they need to do a little bit more to promote summer internships and promote employment in some fields, because it gives students the opportunity to say they have experience, because everyone knows the favorite expression is, oh, well, you don't have enough experience, but how can I get experience if you don't afford it to me?
Right.
I completely agree with that. As far as summer opportunities at law firms and things like that, most of them, as I've been told, are afforded to college students after their first year. But as far as high school students, I know that the government used to have a program where high school students could get connected between the ages of, I believe it was 16 and 18. But I know that that's been cut now, so that you have the younger students who can work at like summer day camps and things like that. And then you have the people who have returned from college that can go to careers.gov.bm. But I know a few years ago, they cut that out for that middle gap between, graduating high school students. That was cut. And so as far as me personally getting high school experience in the career field, I haven't seen much. I know they do have a program that they've piloted at Berkeley and I believe at Cedar Ridge, where you do work shadowing for 1 day a week, which I certainly think is beneficial. But as far as the actual companies during the summer, I would have to agree with Jay Shanae.
What I could say on this particular issue, I'm a young man who finds myself working for a law firm. I've worked for two, actually, during my 18 years. And what I would say to young people alike, and to both of you, but to all young people alike, is to put yourself out there. You have to know what you want, and you have to find somebody that you admire in that field. And you have to go to them, and you have to show them this is what you want. You have to want it as bad as you want to breathe. You wake up and you know this is what you want for the day, and you have to want it and get it. Myself in particular, I knew what I had to do. I graduated high school at 16 years old. I was in a similar position as you guys, because what opportunities are there for a 16-year-old you guys would have experienced during the summer. But this was my everyday thing now, because I had already graduated high school. I knew I wanted to become a lawyer. I knew I would need a scholarship in order to go to university. That wasn't afforded to me. And so I knew I had to get in the courtroom. And so every day I found myself in magistrate's court, just there. I was able to get spotted by Elizabeth Christopher. She saw me and she said, hey kid, come along with me for a week. For that week I knew I had to show her something. I was with her for a year and a half, and then now I work at Compass Law Chambers with Charles Richardson. Opportunities that I'm eternally grateful for, that are invaluable. I'm gaining some invaluable experience doing this. But my message to young people, such as yourself, that are out there wondering, hey, what can I do to get into my career of choice? You have to find out what you want, identify that goal, and find out who are the people in that field, who are the best and the brightest in that field, and go to them. Don't just send them the email or the letter. Follow up. They have to see a dedication in you, a commitment. And when they see that drive, I'm pretty sure they'll give you an opportunity.